Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Season 2, Episode 5, The Jedi. So, try to be shocked, but Ahsoka's in this show. I know it's shocking. Um, but she is no Jedi. He's un Jedi. He's un Jedi. I'm sorry. They jump right into Ahsoka just kind of chipper shredding everything, as is her wont. Makes sense. She's probably one of the highest tier individuals in the setting right now. Like, literally probably in the number 3 slot, if you think about it, behind Luke and Palpatine. Yeah. Okay. Evil Lady has a spear. They show that early. I also like how Ahsoka uses her lightsabers tactically. Did you notice that? Slice, and then gets rid of them and goes back to hiding in the fog. That's actually really cool, and gave me a lot of video game ideas for, like, in-combat stealthing and just some stuff you can do with that. That's just a cool concept, and they work with it very, very well. I am not going to comment on her Leku and how terrible they look, because they do, but I'm going to be paying very careful attention to her acting, because I was rather fond of the original actress for Ahsoka. I know we just talked about being willing to swap actresses, but the thing is, there's no reason for this particular swap here, to my knowledge. In fact, of all of the behind-the-scenes I'm aware of about Ahsoka, I have no idea why they decided to swap actresses in this case. Like, there's got to be some reason. They don't just do that, right? Yeah, like, there's absolutely no reason that she can't just repeat her role, right? I'm confused. Like I said, I'm confused. It's a weird call. I'm sure there's some reason somewhere I just don't know about. But it's not like Rosario Dawson is a bad actress, so cool. It's just, again, weird. I will say, and I noticed it a little bit in this episode, I do have one small complaint about Rosario Dawson. They, for whatever reason, and this is a weird choice, they like to have her do her own fight scenes, and she's not really great with her footwork. I actually commented on this back in the Season 7 thing for Clone Wars, if you're paying attention. If you ever want to really pay attention, if you ever really want to see how good someone is, like how good someone really is in any kind of martial arts fight or whatever, watch their feet. The footwork is where it really is, right? This is true for boxing, this is true karate or taekwondo or judo or lightsaber fights. You watch the feet and you can tell how good someone really is. And I commented on that because we had that one amazing fight back in episode 3, I think, or rather episode 7. So I just wanted to comment on that because I've already seen a scene in her show where she's fighting someone. We'll skip spoilers here. And the someone she's fighting is doing some really, really good footwork and maneuvering, and it's like you could believe that that's a Jedi going, bow, bow, bow. And then you see Rosario Dawson, who's... The best way I could call it is she's shuffling. She's just like, and it's just terrible. It's terrible in contrast. Why didn't you get a stunt double in for these scenes? I'm very confused by all of these choices. Yeah, her movement, it's true in this one. She's got the fight with the magistrate, and she's not there. And again, I find myself wondering, why? There's got to be a reason here. And now, granted, maybe it's literally a budget thing. Remember, Season 2 was very, very rushed, and didn't exactly have a high budget because Disney. So maybe it's literally just they didn't want to do the makeup and the outfit and all that stuff for one of the other for one of the other actors, a stunt double, someone actually knows what they're doing. It's a weird complaint, and it's a minor complaint, but it's something I can't help but notice immediately. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly, Rex. It's wild. It's just like, it's a minor complaint. It's just something that stuck for me. Just something that just kind of made me go, yeah, maybe she insisted on it. I don't know. I have no idea. There's an absence of information I have here. I'm just speculating in a vacuum. So then Ahsoka goes up and she gives them 1 day to surrender. Why? Like, I know that she wants, the intel, so she doesn't want to just kill the magistrate, which she could do right then and there with a properly thrown lightsaber. But, why? In fact, near as I can tell, there is no benefit whatsoever to giving her enemy a day's advance warning. Yeah, the real reason is because Mando hasn't shown up yet. And so the reason is so that she can interact with... Yeah, so... There's a lot of because plot in this show. I mean, in Star Wars in general, I should say. Anywho, so the man without a name, or excuse me, Mando actually shows up, Jaren. So we see a little bit of the settlement. Very, very much in squalor. I was going to comment on the usage of details and like how much crap and debris and dust is on the ground. But then I realized all I have to do is point to the armed guards patrolling the roofs and the fact that they're discouraged from talking to other people. Yeah. Cool. Cut to the magistrate. There's a frickin' pond and a garden. Cool. I do like how she hires Mando to go kill the Jedi, and Mando says, "Where do I find this Jedi?" And it's actually pretty smart of him. He doesn't say yes, but it sounds like he's saying yes. So she goes along with it, and he's very careful with his word choice here. Okay. We also find out why she had that spear, Beskar spear. Okay. So this is someone who's obviously got some kind of connections and or wealth. And then we find out a little bit later that she's actually in charge of a interplanetary strip mining operation. Mass carving out planets and doing wide-scale devastation in order to rip as many resources out of them as possible in order to, be able to build ships. And there's a very, very tiny little line there, which actually amuses me. I actually wrote it down here. Looks like she's still in business. Of course she's using slave labor. She's evil. But that little line about her still being in business says all it needs to about where we're going with all this. And, of course, the First Order, which somehow has bagrillions of credits lying around. Which is another thing they've never explained. I'm sorry for complaining about this. I hate to just keep circling. It's like the sequel trilogy is this black hole that I keep orbiting. But did you ever notice how the First Order is just swimming in credits in the sequel trilogy? Now, I can tell you right now why. It's two reasons. First is because nobody cares about the economics of Star Wars. Why are you asking questions about this, you loser lore? You idiot. Stop asking these questions. Second of all, it's because they're just the Galactic Empire again, right? And the Galactic Empire had tons and tons of money, so they didn't need to think about it. It was just Galaxy. There you go. Boom. Done. Yeah, they built an entire fleet under an ocean. They've got credits to burn. They have resources on a galactic scale. Cool. But you know one of my favorite story arcs all the way back in the Clone Wars show? It was when Palpatine had put into motion a plan that he had planned for a while. A plan that he had planned? I can't talk. He had this whole plan line set up to fund the further expansion of the GAR and to help start building what would eventually become the Galactic Empire's military. And so he actually started taking over, the banks. The interstellar banks. It's a great story arc. And it's actually one of my favorites of the Clone Wars, like I said. Not just because of the fact that, it's economics and it makes sense and it fleshes out the world building and it helps to explain a whole lot about how Palpatine was able to fund the rapid military expansion of the Galactic Empire. But also because it's just a solid story. It's actually a Padme-focused story with some good character bits for Padme and Anakin. Good stuff. So, yeah, it's also Anakin taking another step to the dark side. It's a really solid arc. But you get why, I look at that and I'm like, yes, that's awesome. You could still tell an engaging story and still make it make sense, And do that kind of boring background stuff as well. Yeah, Clovis. Poor Clovis. I shouldn't laugh. That's hilarious, by the way, Hasbus. I believe you. That is fantastic. Getting back to the point. Let's try to break orbit of the sequel trilogy here. So we see the fire. We saw the fires from orbit, and we see how absolutely destroyed and devastated this horrible place is. We also see that Beskar resists lightsabers, which is good, because if it didn't, then Mando would be dead right here and now. There's also some good lines, some good tidbits here as Ahsoka's talking to him. She mentions the Jedi fell long ago, and his response is, yes, so did the Empire, but they're still hunting him. We also see Grogu very hesitant to use the Force, which makes sense for a lot of reasons. Obviously, he's been in hiding for a huge chunk of time, like 20-some-odd years. We also... We see... It, how many of you have ever done something you're proud of, something skilled? Now, how many of you have had to then repeat that particular trick, that particular thing, in front of a crowd? I should know, I speedrun on camera, but also I play games pretty much every day on camera. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense for both reasons that he's just being pushed in the corner a little bit and isn't really wanting to... Yeah. Yeah, he wanted a shiny ball. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. And yeah, we get a lot of confirmation of all the stuff I was speculating on all the way back in Season 1, if you remember, just based on the timeline. Like, just by knowing he was 50 years old, I was like, oh, okay. So it's good to know that I was actually right about that. They actually had thought about that in advance. There's also a really nice tidbit. There's this really great bit where Grogu... Oh, yeah, I can finally start calling him Grogu. Grogu successfully pulls the ball to him, and Mando's response is like enthusiastic praise. I don't know how else to call that, right? Like, it's probably the lightest I've ever heard him speak in the show to date. Of just, yeah, good boy, good job, I knew you could do it. Like, yeah, there's that proud father thing just right there. And that's a great little understated scene. I love that. I love the acting there. We also see the obvious fact, you know, he's clearly grown a very strong attachment to you, which is the exact moment at which Ahsoka decides she can't train him, which makes sense because, of course, Ahsoka in particular would be even more hesitant than most people about training someone who has strong attachments to other people. I don't even need to go into this, do I? Like, this is all just right there. She doesn't even say it, by the way. She never name drops Anakin. She never name drops Vader. That's good. She doesn't need to. So, okay. We find out about Elsbeth, about the interplanetary thing, about the still in business thing. There's this fight scene that progresses immediately after this. I had some random thoughts about the fight scene. Get the best of us. First of all, I have to reference the HKs. You know, one thing that threw me... I was actually thinking about this because I haven't put away this book yet. I haven't really had time. I've still got Shadows of the Empire just sitting on my desk here. And there's a scene in this where a bunch of pirates are trying to capture Luke, and Luke is trying to get out. And he gets his lightsaber, and he's trying to swath his way through it. And the book emphasizes just how difficult it is. How much he has to trust the Force to be able to hold off like 20-some-odd pirates to get out. And everything emphasizes that that's a big deal, and it's shocking that he's able to accomplish this incredible feat. Like, the pirates are shocked, Luke himself is shocked, Lando, who's with him, helping him, is shocked. Like, and when Vader hears about it, Vader's just like, hell yes, that's my boy. But I bring all that up because Luke is one of the highest tiers in this setting. He's up there at the top, right? Hero status. And even fighting off 20 pirates with guns was a significant thing for him. Now, granted, that was during the time in between Empire and Return, but it still says something about relative power level in a good way. I've said for years upon years upon years that one of the things I like about Star Wars is that the strongest Jedi will still get killed if they got kicked out the airlock, right? Yeah, I know the joke you're going to make, but you get my point. That even the strongest Force user is still, like, down here when compared to other fiction, right? There's no Doctor Strange equivalent. There's no Thanos. There's no Gandalf. You know, you get my point. There's no people who just do absolutely ludicrously high tiers of power. Yeah, kind of like the Witchers in Witcher 3, to use a very specific thing. Yeah, if there's a nuke in the cupboard, that Jedi's dead. The reason I bring all this up is obviously Star Wars has dipped both in and out of this repeatedly over the years. Sometimes individual Force users are just crazy good, and sometimes they're not. Even back in Clone Wars, where the Jedi were able to do some pretty high-tier feats, we also show in the same show that the troopers, when they go after Jedi, they know exactly how to bring down Jedi, and it's sheer numbers, right? I even commented on that. sheer numbers, right? And very coordinated, dedicated, swarming fire that just eventually overwhelms them. Or you could be the one dude who happened to be in a fighter ship, and, well, that ship is destroyed, and that's the end of that guy's life. Because his ship blew up. Nothing you can do about that. Remember, Palpatine was willing to throw away entire capital ships to knock out a single Jedi. That's just his thing. Yeah, they're still flesh and blood, and I like that. And this is all in praise of this episode, because while Star Wars dips in and out of all this when it comes over the years, you'll notice that here, if you had Ahsoka walk up and just body all of those troops, like walk down the main road, and then just fight all the troops and the droids right then and there, I would have been like, yeah, okay. I wouldn't have even questioned it, because it's Ahsoka and because this is Star Wars. But instead they decided to do the smart thing. Instead she Batmans her way through them, splits them up, and goes and takes them off bit by bit by being smart and careful. And I like that. Like, that does a good job of trying to emphasize the nature of how relatively low tier even someone who is high tier is. Yeah, exactly, Rex. You get it. Like, this is smart. This is smart. I'm good. I'm good. This is more impressive than I thought it would be. So we see the double duel. Mando and the Grunt, I catch his name, who are having your classic gunslinger duel. And then Ahsoka and Elsbeth, who are having a more typical duel. And this is where the choreography starts to fall apart a little bit. Obviously, the woman playing Elsbeth is doing a great job, and Rosario Dawson is not. To put that as bluntly as I can. Again, I already commented on this. It's just, I was really into it. Because they even, you notice they didn't overly edit most of the fight. Did you catch that? It's one of the first fights where they actually allowed the camera to just sit and breathe while the fight was going on. It was still a little bit more edited than it should be, but it wasn't the ridiculous nonsense it's been the whole show. So, some decent fights there, despite her footwork problems. So, she beats her. It's a good fight. Cool, cool. I'm enjoying it. The guy's like, he tries for the trick shot, right? Oh yeah, I surrender, sucker. Mando obviously shoots him. That's the end of that. Which then leads, I already answered that, Zach Daft, which then leads to the Wham line. Where is your master? Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn? Now, I want to explain this for just a second. How many of you know who Wolverine is? So, here's the deal. Wolverine is the face of X-Men. He is the most famous X-Men by a wide margin. In fact, most people who don't really know what the X-Men are, or the nature of how any of that is, know who Wolverine is. In fact, a lot of people, if I say Logan, will look at me like, who? Not realizing that Logan's actually his frickin' name. Yeah, Wolverine is the X-Man. And like it or not, Thrawn for many, many years has been the Star Wars guy. He is so popular. And it's actually kind of strange. I've never really been able to properly categorize this, but Thrawn is the popular guy when it comes to Star Wars. You could argue there's a couple that are more popular, but like, he's at least in top 5 territory in terms of public consciousness. There are people. Yeah, he's like Bumblebee for Transformers. Yeah, you don't even have to go that deep to know who Thrawn is. But here's the thing. Thrawn was Thrawn had quite a bit of an impact back in the EU. And he, for obvious reasons, functionally started the EU with the Thrawn trilogy. And also continued to have an influence and impact after that, and then they kept going with it. You get it, there's a bunch of stuff, but it was all EU stuff. All that's gone. Nuked. Doesn't actually apply anymore. So when they brought Vader forward for Rebels, that was considered a big deal. But Rebels is, well, tertiary canon, and always has been. And I know what you're thinking. No, Rebels counts. Yes, it does. But you have to understand the tiering system. For whatever reason, and this is just how it tends to do, it doesn't count the same level unless it's a certain type of fiction. One of the biggest things, one of the biggest shticks about Mandalorian is its live action. Live action stuff has always had a higher tier of canon than anything else when it comes to Star Wars. So, yes, Thrawn was in Rebels. He was actually pretty good in Rebels. But now we're actually showing him in live action. That name drop suddenly pushes Thrawn into no really status. being acknowledged here. Yeah, exactly, Dakota. Being acknowledged here is significant. Yeah, exactly. This is literally right below the movies, um, in terms of how it's considered. This is the no really. This is, yeah, Thrawn is a thing. We're canonizing Rebels. We're canonizing. It's dragging all this. Again, it's what I was talking about. It's dragging everything up. And I know Rebels was already canon, but this is trying to make it very, very fundamentally clear. No, really, Rebels is canon. Drag, drag, drag. And that's the significance of this moment. Because the line itself isn't just a fan servicey line. This is trying to lay down the bricks and line things up and try to reach out to people who, I know this is going to sound weird, aren't really Star Wars fans. People who don't actually know that name immediately or are like, wait, what? Hang on, how does that have significance? For the longest time, several of us thought, you remember when they first announced the sequel trilogy? We actually thought, not before the trailer, a lot of us actually thought that they were going to do a take on the Thrawn trilogy, the Now What story. Not literally, but like something in that particular direction when it came to the sequel trilogy. Obviously, they didn't, but it was such a common thing amongst so many people, because of course it was. And yeah, exactly. I hesitate to use the word normies, but the hard reality is that some people dismiss the animated stuff and some people just don't follow the lore. And that's fine. There's no judgment here. But that's the point. Dragging Thrawn onto what is functionally the big screen, live action, mainline show, one step below the movies, makes this clear. Thrawn is now being pulled forward, and he will have some relevance over in Ahsoka's show. Okay. I'm kind of with that. I wish they did better with him in Ahsoka, but that's another topic. That's a whole other topic. Yeah, no, absolutely. But I actually know two people personally, as in-person friends of mine, who have obviously read the Thrawn trilogy and the Thrawn duology and several EU books, and are aware, and so like the Outbound Flight or the recent, I forget what it's called. There's a Thrawn novel, which actually occurs during Rebels. I can't remember what it's called, but you probably know the one I'm talking about. And haven't watched Rebels. Now, again, there's no judgment here, but I do have to point out that at least part of that is Rebels' own fault, because one of the biggest problems with Rebels is it's this great, serious, dark, wonderful, extremely contiguous, well-designed, well-thought-out, well-acted, well-animated show that is also a dumb kid's show. Yeah, if you watch Rebels Season 1, like the first few episodes are just... Really? If you remember, that was pretty much my own reaction when I first started going through the show for the mini nations I was doing. It was just... Really? Yeah, no, Youth to 7. Their Star Destroyers are crap. Their Stormtroopers are crap. There's a freaking scene where they murder a Stormtrooper, one of the Stormtrooper, the villain of the week, or the villain of the season, murders a Stormtrooper, and it's treated as like a funny, ha-ha, like a wah-wah, kind of a humorous moment. And that's just the tone of the show in general. It wasn't until they got to about Season 2 that Rebels started being a freaking show. And it did some great stuff after that, let me tell you what. Oh yeah, Ezra is just such a brat early on. I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. The point here is this Thrawn thing is actually significant. And it makes sense, even though it is very much a, hey, you remember that one name you know? I still understand why they did it, and I'm kind of with it. I probably would have made a similar move myself. Because you need to make that name known. You need to put that stamp out there. You need to ring the bell, for lack of a better way to put it. Yeah, I think the execution matters. You'll notice she's very quietly just talks about her master the whole time. Who's your master? Who's your master? Find me your master. Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn? That's the other thing. Has to say the whole title. If she just said Thrawn, that might have still worked. But she made it clear. Grand Admiral Thrawn. Let's wrap up the episode super quick, because I want us to talk about something else here. It's an interesting story tidbit. I wonder if Grogu had actually left the narrative here, how it worked, and what kind of story ideas they would do. They would never do that, of course. Grogu is simply too valuable of a merchandising opportunity. But, yeah, it's an interesting thing to talk about. So go to Tython. Use one of the Force lines to call out to see if anybody notices him. You'll notice the continuation of the concept of Force lines, by the way. Force lines were implied all the way back in Empire Strikes Back, but weren't actually codified until Rebels, which is much, 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 much more recent. I actually talked about that during my coverage of Rebels. Force lines are exactly what they sound like, by the way. They're ley lines except for the Force. They're ley lines in space. That's what they are. I actually like the idea of Force lines, and I'll probably continue that in our Wars when we get to there. And of course, Tython. Got a name drop, Tython. That's a deeper cut, but the thing is, if you're paying attention, this is the first time Tython is actually codified, by the way. If you're paying attention, there's a lot of little references in this episode. I actually have been going out of my way to not mention each of them. But unlike your usual member berries, which this very show has been guilty of, all of these have been very carefully well written and well polished and decently presented. Again, the Tython reference is the perfect example of this. He could have said, several thousand years ago, during the time of the Old Republic, there was a place where Jedi were trained in the ways of the Force. They fought a great Sith Empire, and that planet was Tython. But though that Jedi Knight is far part of the distant past, Grogu, maybe, they could have really screwed this up, right? They could have stumbled on this pretty hard, but instead, all she says is just name drops the planet, mentions that it's a locus point for the Force, ley lines, right? And then go there and try. I don't know what'll happen. There's not a lot of Jedi left. Okay, I'm actually with all of that. Yeah, it's even less, like, Andor pulled this exact same trick with the Rakatan invaders. Did you catch that one? Because I sure as hell did. Or even the fact that there's some HK droids in this episode, which, again, they don't do anything with. They just run over that very quickly. There's the HK droids moving on. Before I go any further, this is something I mentioned before. In fact, we had a whole discussion of it. One of the biggest problems I've had with Mandalorian so far is that it's being used as the spine for launching pretty much all of Disney's major televised properties. Episode 1 of Season 2 is a oh god, I can't think of the word. Pilot. There we go. God. It's a pilot for the Book of Boba Fett. Episode 3 is a pilot for Bo-Katan's show, which I don't remember the name of. Episode 4 is the pilot for Rangers, and Episode 5 is the pilot for Ahsoka's show. Every single one of these episodes has been a launching point for another show, with the only exception being Episode 2, which was just kind of a filler thing. This has been bothering me since the beginning, up and down, like tidbits, right? This is probably the first one that doesn't bother me, and that's doubly funny because I'm not actually a huge fan of Ahsoka. Oh, don't mistake me, she's an interesting character when she's used right, but as we talked about back during Clone Wars Season 7, she can also be used very, very wrong. So, I'm with it more than I thought I would be. Which brings me to our scoring. Now, I don't wish Ahsoka was dead, I just wish she was better used. That's really all that boils down to. I don't care how big her dick is, okay? Just make her a good character. Before I tell you, because I'm going to be honest, I've already kind of decided what I think this episode should be. But before I tell you, I want to talk about this a little bit, because there's this thing. It's a very common thing. It's a human thing, but it's also very much an executive thing. Where a lot of people will take the wrong... It's true, Planet Punk. The wrong lesson from something, right? I mean, seriously, hazardous. Because this is a very solid episode. I actually think this has replaced my favorite episode of the show so far. I do agree that it's orange. I do agree that it's a high orange, but it just doesn't quite hit that excellent point, right? It doesn't quite hit the levels of Welcome to the Playground, or That Would Be Me. or daughter of Ferrix. It's damned good, but that's what orange means. That's how that system works. But my point is, I could just see someone somewhere looking at how much people very much enjoyed this episode, because I remember the buzz, you know, the Thrawn reveal, the usage of Ahsoka, tying this into the prequel trilogy, like, all of this has been very, very solid. But I cannot help but think that someone probably looked at that and pulled the wrong answer out of that, you know what I mean? And said, oh, that's it! More references! That's what people like! Oh yeah, I noticed that. The samurai fight going along right alongside a Wild West shootout, which was a great juxtaposition. Again, the only complaint I have there is that Rosario Dawson has no idea how to do choreography. It's you know, that's what pulls this down a little bit. But yeah, I'm with it. I'm with it. Next episode is The Tragedy. I have a feeling that something bad's going to happen in this episode. I don't know why. It's just a vibe I'm getting. What about her acting? So before I get into that, the next episode's pretty short. It's only 28 minutes long. So we'll go ahead and see that. What do I think about Rosario Dawson's acting? I would say it's about average. In the overall gamut of quality with acting. And I've seen some extremely, extremely good actors in my time. I would say that Dawson manages an average performance here as Ahsoka. She does not do as good of a job as her voice actress did, but her voice actress also had years to get used to the role, so that's kind of an unfair comparison. Yeah, I feel, I legitimately think this is a miscast, and I think her makeup is crap. I do. I'm sorry. Did you notice how you can literally see how, like, the foam is bending and folding in on itself, her Leku? It's cheap looking. And I get it. They have a budget problem, and this is television, and they have people breathing down their necks to make the show as cheap as possible, but it literally looks fake. I mean, even the way it moves, it's so clear she's just wearing this foam headdress, and it's just like, it does that thing that foam will do, where it'll like do this, but it won't actually naturally flow like Leku do. I understand the problems, and I'm not just trying to be too harsh about it. I'm just pointing out the obvious. You notice I didn't even bring this up until just now. But yeah, her acting is just, it's a little bit too wooden, it's a little bit too basic, and I'm not with it. And of course, we'll see what we think of it when the Ahsoka show comes around, where she obviously has a little bit more focus. Oh. That was strange. I mean, I've been arguing that sci-fi and fantasy both should be more CGI or animated for, God, like at least 8 years. Maybe 9 years at this, but it's been a while. I've just seen too much good stuff, and I've seen the contrast between the two. And I understand, yes, something like Prodigy. There's this thing. Some people just prefer live action. We actually just talked about this, actually. Because some people didn't watch Rebels because it's a cartoon. Oh, not because of the kiddie stuff. Not because of the stuff at the beginning. Just because it's a cartoon. There is this overwhelming cultural momentum we are still pushing against in 2024. Thanks, Hanna-Barbera. And yes, I do point to them as a major push for this in the United States. That animation just isn't at the level of live action. That a live action show will always be higher tier than an animated show. It's nonsense. It is literal nonsense. There are other countries in the world that do not have this bias because they don't have the weight and aggravation of what Western animation devolved into back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Yeah, France and Japan, another great example. Yeah, like, I actually know people, that's a good one, Charles. I know people who have refused to watch Arcane because it's animated. It's nonsense. It is absolute nonsense. There's nothing good about it. I don't know what to say about that. I don't know where to go with that. It doesn't help, and I do think this is a continuing contributing factor It doesn't help that too much of modern... Yeah, it did hurt one record. That's a good example. It continues to hurt modern cinema, movies specifically, because a lot of films in the last, I'd say about 8 years or so, maybe more like 6, have turned into digital nonsense, right? I know what you're going to say. Digital nonsense was before that. Yeah, but it's gotten really widespread. The sheer quantity of films which turn into just a video game cutscene, and occasionally there's an actual actor down there who's running across a green floor with a green backdrop, flailing at the air. It's become commonplace. It's the kind of thing that is normal now. And I know that there's a lot of people who've been pushing back against that, myself included, because it looks cheap. It does. And the funny thing is, you're saying, oh, so CGI is bad. No. As usual, it's the usage of the tool that matters. I talked about this recently in Discord. You can really tell the really, really good usages of CGI in a movie because people who don't know will argue that there is no CGI in that movie. They are, of course, wrong. It's just they used it very carefully and very precisely alongside traditional effects. Good CGI can look very, very good, especially nowadays. Bad CGI looks like the freaking Flash movie. Have you seen that? Have you seen that drivel? I wonder. Hang on a second. Yeah, the best CGI is like any kind of good visual or audio presentation. You don't even notice it. You're not supposed to notice it. It's supposed to look real. I'm not going to be able to find it in time. I don't know where it is. If you have the time, I won't show it to you because it's going to take too long to find it. But if you have the time, do yourself a favor sometime and just look up, like, flash film CGI, right? A flash film bad scene might also get it. Because, oh my god, it's trash. It's trash. It looks so bad. It looks like a PS3 game. Like an early PS3 or a late PS2 game. And I'm sorry, that doesn't look very good. And that's my point. That's what I'm trying to get at. It looks like crap. Yeah, no, some people don't remember Jurassic Park had CGI in it. Like, it was mostly touch-ups and detailing on top of practical effects, but they had CGI in that film. I know people who don't even notice it's there. Because it was very, very well done. And that movie came out in the 90s. I'm getting a little bit off topic. The point I'm trying to reach here is that anybody who looks at animation and says, ugh, is an idiot. And the overwhelming push against, you know, oh, we need to have it live action, aggravates the crap out of me. That's all I have to say about that. It looks like a PS2 game. It does! It looks like a PS2 game. It looks like trash. Let's move forward. I'm going to get another episode in, possibly two. Like I said, this is a short one. Season 2, Episode 6, The Strategy. I'll see you in a minute.